Hello, and welcome to our webinar this morning. We'll just give everyone a few seconds here to join in. If you are just joining us, this is the How to Use Technology to Cut Costs and Improve Efficiency for Your Business webinar. We are going to be joined here with an awesome group here, a group of leadership here at Executech. Again, we're just giving everybody just a few seconds, few minutes here to log on and join the room. My name is Gary, and I will be here moderating and helping in the chat. I just want to let everyone know that if you have any questions, you are free to use the chat and ask them. We will take them as they come, but we'll also have a little bit of time at the end as well. So feel free to ask any questions that you may have as we go through this presentation. Great question, Scott. Another item there. Yes, this webinar is going to be recorded. We will have the recording available to all attendees and registrants shortly thereafter, and then it will also be live on executech.com, so you can view it and share it as you want. It looks like everybody's here joining us. Again, welcome to the webinar. To start us off, I wanted to introduce our panel today. We've got some awesome members of our Executech team joining us today. At the top, we've got DJ Dorf, who is our CEO at Executech. DJ has a cool background in technology, and he's very passionate about the intersection of people and technology. And during his tenure at Executech, he's helped us become more focused on driving forth new initiatives with data and metrics, and for providing greater careers at people at Executech. We also have Chris Noakes, our CTO at Executech. Chris has been at the company almost 10 years now, maybe over 10 years. Correct me there if I'm wrong, Chris. And Chris is known in-house as the Google. He's very smart and intelligent when it comes to all things IT. We're excited to have him with us. And then we also have Michael Pearson, who's the Senior Vice President. He's out of our Sacramento office. Michael was the founder of DSA Technologies, that's now the Sacramento office. And he has a wide variety of experiences in IT management, cloud, and consulting as well. So we're excited to have everyone here and welcome them. I'll turn my camera over to Michael. And we'll go ahead and get started. Oops. So the first thing I wanted to do is kick off some questions and get things rolling. And I'll take put a first question out there to you, DJ, and ask you, what do you see as the outlook for business in the coming months? Obviously, things have been very different. Things have changed a lot due to COVID. What are you anticipating being the situation for businesses in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, so I think, as we see things slowly starting to open up, depending on what, geography your business is in, I think for some, there's an expectation that we're going to return back to normal in terms of financial performance or picking up any projects that were put on hold or revenue that were lost. And my sense is it's probably going to take a little bit longer than a lot of people anticipate. And as a result, as a business leader, the thought shouldn't be, okay, let's just go back to how things were in January and February. It should be doubling down on what's allowed the business to get through the last couple of months. So that would include narrowing your priorities and really doubling down on those, making sure that internally you're clear on, look, these are the top 1 or 2 things that we're really trying to accomplish as a business right now, and not spreading yourself too thin with a bunch of new investments or new initiatives. There are certainly some companies that have done very well during this time, or there are certain companies that will bounce back quicker than others. But for fellow business leaders out there, I would definitely encourage them to take the long game approach and recognize that this may be a little bit more drawn out than they anticipate. And at least how that, translates to what we're doing at Executech, we're really focused on just making sure that we set those clear expectations with our team members, so that they know that we're going to continue to prioritize moving forward, just as we have the last couple of months.
Awesome, thank you, Michael. Do you have anything to add about what you're seeing is what's going to happen over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I think the big deal that we're seeing in California is that there'll be a very slow migration back into the office. So the work from home model that we've helped clients get to, that's going to exist for quite a while. And in some cases, our clients are telling us it's just going to stay that way. So we're expecting to continue to support that from a security standpoint, from a mobility standpoint. I think the other thing that we're working with clients on already is understanding how to tighten up their purchasing, and how to work with their vendors, and just help them get better about managing their costs on the IT side as they're looking at an unsure rest of the year.
Great. Let me transition a little bit to the more IT side, and let me ask Chris, what are you seeing as the outlook for IT, whether that's in-house IT departments or just how we're using technology in general? What do you see coming in the next few months?
Yeah, so kind of like Michael alluded to, like I think we're going to see a continued demand for work from home. That's still happening. Like you said, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go away necessarily overnight. I think we're going to see a continued evolution of collaboration tools. So, many of us have all gotten used to using whether it's Teams or Zoom, and we're going to see a little bit of an evolution happening there. You know, everything from like, hey, there's creative backgrounds to like, how can we include more people and make larger grids? It's also interesting. I had a conversation with a client yesterday about a need that they're looking at, realizing that this is probably, this changes things a little bit. Things are gonna, we're gonna be in this mode for a while. They're looking at, hey, how do I, in our conference room, we have remote teams, like how can we implement a TV wall where we've got multiple, TVs across a whole wall, and how do we have multiple people on those Zoom meetings or those team meetings? So I think we're going to see more of that kind of thing coming up.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Michael, likewise, are you seeing anything like that where it's sort of a new use of an existing technology within this new environment and situation?
Yeah, I think we're the same thing that Chris talked about. Certainly, people are looking at how do we make our office space become more of a gathering space where we can have these larger conferences and we're pulling people together. I think the important thing for us is helping our clients also prioritize where they're using their IT spend. Certainly, we want to make sure that given this change where people are working remote, we're not necessarily finding ways to cut on security, which has become more important. But if there are other areas that they can cut around their hardware on site or other pieces like that, that's probably a better option for them. So we're just trying to help them manage those and make sure that they keep security forefront, because that's been critical.
It's a great point, and we will dive more into those type of questions around whether it's hardware or security ways to cut costs or increase efficiency. Let me transition here to a different line of questioning briefly, and let me ask you, DJ, what is one takeaway that businesses can learn in terms of the reaction to COVID? Maybe if you could go back, 4 or 5 months and warn yourself, what would you say? What would you have done differently or prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is that on the business side of things, companies that were in a position of strength prior to COVID have been able to weather this storm a lot better than those who are kind of surviving month to month. And so to that end, prior to COVID, most economies across the US and across the West were seeing really positive results. And that was trickling down to a lot of our clients, a lot of our partners. And it can be really tempting during a time of boom to put even more chips on the table, to double down your aggression. And you certainly do need to spend money to make money, and you want to be an opportunist to a certain extent. But a lot of them were not putting in reserve, rainy day savings, just like you would in your own personal life. And now it's kind of that day of reckoning for them. And unfortunately, we can't go back in time, but a big lesson to be learned is, there is going to be an upswing. The economy is going to be booming again, whether it's a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And the temptation is going to be just the same then as it has been for the past couple of years, which is to live on the edge a little bit financially, maybe not reserve as much as companies should. And my hope is that more companies will make an investment in making sure that they're financially stable during times of plenty, because it's not a great idea to wait until a bust period to start making those changes you need to be financially stable.
Yeah, that's great insight. Michael, do you have anything to add on your end from what you saw in your office around what the takeaway could be or how you would have reacted differently?
Yeah, I completely agree with DJ. We were a very conservative group, so we were in pretty good shape. I think the key for us was just really appreciating how flexible our team could be when we needed to cut costs or when we needed to be more careful about how we were managing schedules. They've been great about it. So, and we're seeing that our clients that had a more flexible team that took advantage of the ability to work from home and kind of embraced the change, whether for good long term or if it was going to be difficult, they've seen the best reaction, they've seen the best results and rebounded the fastest. Those that really struggled with it and waited till the last moment continued to struggle through it. So I think it all just depends on what your mindset was before and how agile you were as a company.
Yeah, makes sense. So let me dive now into sort of the core of our discussion today, and that's around using technology to reduce costs. And we'll kind of go through several different areas of focus in terms of how you might use technology to reduce costs or increase efficiency. And let's start here with, what are some, and this is kind of for the group, but, I'll throw this first out to maybe Chris. What are some high-level steps a business can start taking now to use technology to reduce operating costs and costs in general?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it would be good maybe to step back and take like a 10,000 foot view just of the needs of the organization. And one thing that's really common is, especially before COVID, a lot of organizations were already using products that were in the cloud, right? But what's really common is we find that they might have Box, they might have Dropbox, they might also have some people using Google Drive, right? Some people might have been using GoToMeeting, as well as other people might have been using Logmein. So I think consolidating a lot of that into using like, well, what is going to be our preferred solution, rather than having this mix of like multiple solutions that different areas or departments or people may be using, makes a lot of sense. And that's probably, a great place to start. I mean, this is a little bit of a plug for Microsoft, but Office 365, I think they kind of saw, as part of their vision, right? Before all of this hit, is like, they were trying to come up with a solution where it was almost kind of like a one size fits all, where, we'll build this into Teams where we also are going to layer in SharePoint, right? Within SharePoint's backend, I mean, there's OneDrive. So a lot of these pieces kind of fit together. So I think just looking at like, what do you have? What's the need? What makes most sense? And how to consolidate.
Great insight. And same question over to you, DJ. What do you see as some of the high level steps a business could start taking to save on technology costs?
Yeah, a cousin of Chris's comments would be, the word roadmap or to plan. I think a lot of companies, a lot of business leaders have felt maybe a little paralyzed, a little panicky over the last couple months. And when you're feeling like that, oftentimes you will put aside some of the more discipline driven tasks that you normally would take. So it could be putting off your one-on-one meetings with your employees. It could be putting off annual reviews. It could be changing the way that you're setting goals or just not setting goals, not holding people accountable. And part of that is planning and road mapping. And I think the temptation is because there's so much uncertainty, because we don't know how long this is going to last or how it's going to evolve, that some companies and some leaders are just actually not planning at all because they find it very challenging to plan. And in fact, the opposite is true. During times of uncertainty, that's when you want to double down on planning. That's when you want to make those investments in setting up that IT roadmap. So in terms of saving costs, for the rest of the year, which I think is a big priority for, everyone attending this webinar and certainly all the clients we're working with, sit down, write down what are your strategic goals for the rest of the year? How does technology relate to those? How is technology going to help you accomplish those? And what is the gap between the technology you have today and the technology that you need to get there? And as Chris mentioned, consolidating the tools you're using is a big part of that. But that planning process will make sure that you're making the right investments. so that you're not over investing in one area that's going to drive up a lot of unnecessary costs or inefficiencies, and that you're also not under investing in other areas where it's going to come to bite you in the future and it ultimately leads to greater expenses as well.
Yeah, great insight. I mean, a roadmap and a plan can't be overstated. Michael, do you have any thoughts on a plan, and maybe, do you have any thoughts on where if I'm a business owner, where do I start? What should be, the first couple of things to focus on in terms of a roadmap plan?
One of the things we've been doing is meeting with our clients and looking at IT, what they would refer to as IT in general. So yes, it's the software side, and it comes down to the planning, but they're leaning on us to say, from an IT infrastructure standpoint, and that could include our data lines. It could include what we're doing for DR. It includes our copiers and how those are connected in. Will you help us talk to our vendors and understand where we can cut costs in general so that we do it wisely? And we're spending some time with our clients going back through that and bringing in key partners and just trying to help them reduce their overall technology cost across all of those areas. And that's not an area that they're familiar with, so it's really appreciated by them.
That's great. And as kind of a follow-up to that question, speaking specifically to maybe the physical infrastructure around IT that supports a company, what are some ways that a company could, or an organization could, start saving money now on maybe new hardware or existing infrastructure?
Yeah, I think for some of our clients where they're looking at the question of, am I buying new servers now? One of the things we're addressing is, do you need to do that? Do you need that hardware spend, or are we just going to continue expanding out into the cloud? Chris had talked about, using Teams, and we're storing files in SharePoint. So we're really questioning whether or not we should be buying the hardware in the first place. Can we save them money by not doing that? Typically, when you're buying hardware as opposed to going to the cloud, you're buying for the next 3 years, where the cloud gives you that great ability to only pay for what you use. So this is really something that's important for us as we're working through that with them and saying, do we need to have this hardware expenditure now? And if not, how is the cloud, and how are we going to use these other resources to be able to offset that cost? And that's going very well for us and really helping them save.
That's awesome. And so let me ask Chris here. Chris, technology has always been used as a tool to make things more efficient and hopefully in many cases to reduce costs. But how is it different now in the light of COVID and especially with work from home? Are there new ways that people are using technology that they hadn't before that's even more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just more of an emphasis, and it's probably just more of a something we're focusing on now, right? And just kind of go back to the previous question and Michael's comments, like something that I think really gets overlooked, and just because it hasn't been top of mind, is licensing. Like very often when there's a need for new infrastructure, or even just like moving something to the cloud, like there are a lot of licensing options that just they get overlooked, and a lot of times when the hardware is purchased, the hardware is purchased with software assurance, and so taking advantage of things like software insurance can really lend towards cutting down the costs of any new investment or any change that you need to make. Like if you're moving infrastructure to the cloud, you could take advantage of that. Specifically with Azure, I mean, there's a lot of, if you can bring your own license, you save significant amounts by moving to the cloud.
Yeah, that's awesome. And this is kind of the transition into our next slide a little bit. But Chris, what are some systems or technologies or even softwares that you would recommend? You've mentioned Microsoft is one, but are there others that you would recommend a company start implementing that would facilitate working from home, working more efficiently, and may end up being a cost saver as well?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few actually. So there's a program that we use at Executech called Warranty Master. I think it's something that hasn't really been leveraged, but as we're talking to the clients, it's something that comes up in conversation. Especially, we saw there was a huge need for immediately purchasing laptops. Many clients wanted to give their employees laptops. Well, Warranty Master gives the ability to kind of track that, right? So have a better idea of what's your refresh cycle look like for equipment. So I mean that's one. Another one would be like leveraging Intune. So Intune, there's a lot of different facets of it, but it does have one of them is a program called Autopilot, and Autopilot gives you the ability to save time when something is purchased and needs to be provisioned, so that it comes pre-configured. Like it has your organization stack that you need and configured for somebody out of the box. So I mean, those are just a couple thoughts and ways that, things that existed before, but there just wasn't a lot of focus on, that I think now we're seeing that those are coming up more frequently.
For sure. DJ, let me ask you: are you seeing things that you, or are there things that you would recommend, maybe on the operations or the administrative side, in terms of system or technologies that could help increase efficiency?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, it's really about making sure that you have one go-to tool for collaboration. This goes back to the consolidation point before. Instead of paying for Microsoft Teams, instead of paying for Slack, and instead of paying for this chat and this intranet and that intranet, making sure that you've just got one go-to collaboration tool. And that will allow you to be more efficient in that tool and not have to be spending on this tool for this department, this tool on this for this department, and this tool for this geography. And that's actually pretty common. We see that at a lot of companies where they have multiple tools that all do the same thing, but everyone in the company isn't on that same platform. And so from just a pure ops admin point of view, just making the decision as an organization that we're going all in on Microsoft Teams. And yes, there are going to be some people who prefer Slack over Microsoft Teams. But given that we're using the Office suite more generally, this makes sense for us. And just, again, making sure that you're deliberate and prioritizing that consolidation, because at the end of the day, while it's only maybe a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, over the course of a year, you start talking about thousands, if not tens of thousands of cost reductions.
Great point. And Michael, anything you'd add on that final point in question there?
Yeah, I think DJ's comment about Teams is important. One of our clients, the biggest challenge was loss of productivity as they went initially remote because they were using so many tools. So the question became, where did the conversation happen? Where did the file get uploaded to? And once we centralized them, they happened to be centralized on Teams. At least we knew where the data was, where the chat was happening, and their ability to set that up properly. So that's really critical, just to avoid wasted time, which is, of course, wasted dollars.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, let me transition a little bit here to our next idea around reducing costs with using the cloud. And Michael, let me ask you: how can a company go about saving money on existing hardware and infrastructure costs?
Yeah, so again, I think we talked on that a little bit around just the ability to buy what you need when you need it. When you're buying hardware, typically if you're buying significant hardware, if you were putting together a server SAN situation, you're buying for what will last you 3 to 5 years, and you're buying that today. With the cloud, we have the ability to grow into our spend, which makes a lot more sense. And then it also provides us the flexibility to protect us from situations like we're experiencing. We don't have to then build out the infrastructure to support everyone connecting in the remote to our specific office. That infrastructure, for all intents and purposes, is already built in the cloud, and we just have to be able to connect in. So the cloud, certainly from a hardware offset standpoint to building your own data center, makes a big difference, and certainly something everyone should be looking at. The smaller organization, the easier that is.
Are you, Michael, and maybe Chris as well, are you guys running into situations where a client or organization has had to scale back and now they've got a bunch of unused hardware? What would you recommend in that situation, proactively going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, there's if they already have the hardware, I would first look to say, like, how can we take advantage of this? Do we have a DR plan? Do we have something already in place? If not, let's leverage some of that infrastructure and let's use it for DR purposes. There's many ways to still make use of something, that maybe has been retired. And if not, I mean, there are programs out there where you can recycle that equipment and still get some benefit out of it. Somebody will get benefit of the use out of it, and you can actually recoup some of your investment.
Awesome. So let me ask here about the cloud specifically, and let me ask you, Chris. Well, we'll start with Chris. How is the cloud a more cost-effective option for businesses? And this may seem common sense to some, but others may still not quite see, how the cloud works and how it could be a cost-effective option.
Yeah. So I mean, this kind of just expand on what Michael said a minute ago. Like I usually tell most clients, now it varies depending on the organization, but you don't want to be in the hardware business. Um, with hardware comes you have to manage that hardware. That's everything from updates. You have to keep it secure. You have to you have to make sure that it's backed up. You got to pay attention to the licensing that goes with that. I mean, it's kind of the old paradigm, and the cloud is really a shift towards let somebody else manage it. And then with that, like whatever platform you decide to go with, the updates are usually baked into it. So you're not worrying. It's the old, hey, if I had an Exchange server, I knew every 3 to 4 years I was going to have to probably look at uploading the new version or upgrading to the next iteration, right? And so there's a significant cost that comes with that, as well as replacing my hardware. I mean, we all know hardware dies. It's not perfect, and that can result in downtime, can result in frustration if there's not other things in place to kind of provide backup resources or high availability. I mean, these are all things that you have to think about if you're going to own managing that hardware.
BJ, let me ask you, what are you seeing as some of the obstacles that a business would face, whether just in terms of their infrastructure, their situation, or just barriers or fears that they have around moving to the cloud? What's stopping somebody from moving to the cloud?
Yeah. So, what's funny is in the IT world, it's our job. We're being hired by our clients. We're working with our partners to help them understand new technologies as they come to the forefront of society. At the same time, there's an understanding among IT experts that you kind of don't want to be the first to try something out because it's not proven, it may not be as secure. And so there's a balance there of wanting to be forward thinking, wanting to make sure you embrace new technologies, but not necessarily always being the first. But that practiced to an extreme leads to people just being very comfortable with what they know. I am close friends with many other CEOs of companies that are similar to Executech, who provide managed IT services, managed services in general to clients. And for the most part, there is a fear among them as it relates to the cloud because they don't know it. They don't have people on their team that know it. And as a result, what they know is hardware and just doing a hardware refresh every 3 to 4 years. And they like that when they do that hardware refresh, they kind of get that big lump sum of revenue that they can recognize. But Executech for many, many years has embraced the cloud. For us, we always feel that it's our responsibility to learn those new technologies so that when the time is right, we can share it with our clients. And so when we go to our clients, usually it's a similar pushback of if they have any internal staff, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to think about moving from what you've been doing for the last 10, 20, 30 years to something completely different. There's concerns about, well, is the cloud secure? There's concerns about how it works. What is the cloud? Where is the cloud? As well as, what is this going to cost me because it's a new cost structure. And so for us, we've prepared all of our IT professionals to have those conversations and to handhold the client through those conversations to help them see that it's ultimately a huge win for them, that it's going to increase their flexibility. It's going to allow them to be more efficient. They'll have access to more services through the cloud. It tends to be a lot more secure than just hosting hardware at your own office. And that ultimately, they don't have to be experts on it, because that's why we're there. We work with hundreds of clients, helping them migrate to the cloud, maintain what they have in the cloud. And so on their end, they don't need to understand every little detail. There's a reason why we're talking to them.
That's great. And a little bit of a plug here. We will plan on, we could talk for hours on the cloud alone and all of its ups and downs and ins and outs. And we will save that for another webinar. So stay tuned for that. But let me ask this, and let me ask Michael, let me ask you, we've talked a little bit about the cost savings related to the cloud in terms of hardware and things like that. Tell us a little bit about how the cloud improves general business performance and efficiency.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things about migrating to the cloud and understanding how you're going to get those benefits is making sure you do a proper assessment up front. I think one of the worst things we see clients attempt on their own is, hey, we tried to move everything to the cloud. It didn't really work out well. What's different with you guys? And it's our ability to do an assessment of what they have, what systems are going to work best in the cloud, how can they maximize the value of what they're buying when you're buying Office 365 and you're buying all of these other resources, and you're looking at Azure, and can you move to a new model of how you're addressing your servers. All of that's really important, and it typically takes an assessment and a discussion of the business to understand how to do that properly. The second thing is we like to dispel any myths that IT goes away. And what I mean by that is we had a law firm that reached out to us and they said, hey, we're going to go to the cloud and get rid of our IT. So we'll never have an IT person, we'll never have support issues, and it'll all be fine. And we had to walk them back a little bit to understand, well, yes, there are some issues around hardware and some of the maintenance things you have that go away, but you'll still have desktops. We still need people to provide you awesome support there. You still need VPN connections and security. So there is still some component of IT that has to exist, and they were going to outsource that, but still, it was that idea that trying to set proper expectations of, yes, there's cost savings, yes, there's agility, but let's make sure that we're not assuming everything just goes away.
Great point. Chris, do you have anything to add on that last point in terms of performance and efficiency with the cloud, or DJ as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I was just kind of trying to think of an example, right? So one of the huge reasons to moving towards the cloud is that everybody's got multiple devices, right? So there's less hoops to jump through to get access to your data. You can now access what you would normally on your laptop or your home computer on your phone or your tablet. It's no longer, hey, I've got to connect up using this VPN client, and then I got to go browse the file share, right? Like now you can literally just pull up whatever document you need on your mobile device, and then email it to someone. So I think there's less hoops to jump through to do what you need to get done. And I know that the more there are, I mean, that generally leads towards a frustrated experience for users.
Awesome. DJ, any additional thoughts on the cloud?
Provides is huge. When you go all in on a hardware refresh, that's what you've got. And you got to make it work, or you've got to spend more money on additional hardware. With the cloud, you can plug and play, you can put things up, you can put things down, and you don't have to wait, another 3 years to be ready for another hardware refresh. So from an efficiency point of view, that ability to evolve in real time is huge.
Awesome. Let me just pause real quick and let everyone know again, if you have any questions regarding these topics that we're covering, or whatever's on your mind in terms of IT and reducing costs, feel free again to ask them in the chat. The chat is open, and we'd love to take your questions now or at the end. Let me transition to one of our final points here through our webinar, and that's on security. And I'll start with you again, DJ. Most business leaders, they understand the importance of cybersecurity. I mean, I think it's been at least top of mind, maybe a high priority for many business leaders for a long time now. We see it a lot in the news more than ever. But how have priorities changed in light of COVID in terms of cybersecurity? How has our approach to cybersecurity changed in terms of business?
Yeah, hopefully the biggest change is that it's become more of a priority for other business leaders. It's tough because at this time with COVID, there might be a lot of business leaders who are feeling that strain on the cost side, and so the thought of making any new investments is really challenging. But security is kind of like an insurance policy. And while it's not a switch that you flip where, okay, I'm secure versus not secure, it is a risk management game. And now's not really the time to be living on the edge and playing with the high risk of not being secure. So there's the table stakes of making sure that you've got the right VPN set up, the antivirus, ransomware protection. But really, given the current situation that we're in, regardless of how quickly your employees come back to the office, the remote workforces can only be an increasingly prevalent thing that we're seeing across our partners and our own companies. And so making sure that we're clear on, bring your own device, a BYOD policy, making it clear on what is acceptable for internet usage, making sure you've got a data policy, putting in the effort to make sure that as a company, you have those protocols and standards in place. The last thing I would say, in terms of where business leaders' heads should be at is now's a great time to do a security awareness training. It sounds fluffy. It sounds like one of those things where, oh, I just need to check the box annually and do it. But employees represent the greatest security risk to any business leader out there. By far, they are the greatest security risk. And something as simple as a 1-hour security awareness training, seminar, luncheon, video chat, whatever it ends up looking like, can pay off huge dividends. Just focusing on those top 3, 4, 5 tips and tricks that will help people to stay secure. Things like, hey, don't click links in emails from people you don't know. When you are processing a wire as an accounting department, you need to have a verbal password that you pass off across, these 2 people. It sounds simple, and I think probably everyone on this webinar right now thinks that's stupid. Who does that stuff? Well, your employees do. Our employees do. Everybody's employees do it because it's very common. So rather than assume that, oh, well, my employees know how to act, I don't need a BYOD policy, they know what's appropriate, what's not. Now is a great time to set those expectations.
Great point. And I mean, repetition, I think, is important too. Just because you did a security training 6 or 8 months ago, it doesn't mean that it's really stuck. And people come, people go, and so it's always good to have reminders of those points. Michael, do you have any additional thoughts around that idea of as DJ said, where leaders' heads need to be at in terms of cybersecurity, especially now?
Yeah, I think the 2 biggest examples, and I'll piggyback off what DJ said, was BYOD and allowing us to implement a standard set of tools for antivirus, anti-malware, making sure people had the right VPN set up, and doing all of those right things. All the systems are patched in a BYOD situation, right? If you don't have systems patched, you're vulnerable. So that was really big. I think the other one that became really important for us is just making sure that, I think it was a week into the COVID thing, we were already seeing phishing emails around COVID and fake PPP notices going to business leaders. So that ability to help them understand what looks right, what they're expecting in their email, how to identify emails that potentially are problematic, and putting in tools in some cases to help them with that is just really important so that they're security aware and that continues onward.
Great. Chris, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple points, and this really kind of goes along with what DJ and Michael have already said. But I, as an organization, we're seeing more and more of this, is to look for a single identity management system. There's a bunch of them out there. Azure AD is something that we leverage, and all the different cloud products and things out there, they've modernized, and they recognize that they need to be able to plug into a single source for identity management, so that you can enforce things like, privileged access, or maybe temporary access for employees that need to only touch something temporarily. MFA is huge, right? Like, we live in a world now where, unfortunately, there's still weak passwords, but even a strong password is not necessarily enough. So MFA is huge to go along with that.
Great points. Thank you. My other question I wanted to ask the group, and I'll start with DJ, is again around security. Businesses, you hear the comment a lot that, oh, cybersecurity equals increased costs, or you want me to pay more, but I think what would your response to that be? How can a business still keep cybersecurity front of mind and as a priority while still keeping costs low?
Yeah, for most businesses, we're not talking about huge monetary investments, right? Now, there are certainly some companies that, depending on their industry, depending on the regulations that they're subject to, it can be a pretty significant financial investment, and that's the cost of being in that industry. But for the vast majority of companies, and especially the vast majority of clients that we work with, they're not subject to overly burdensome regulations. So we're not talking about $50,000, $200,000 in security investments. We're talking, $500 a month, and the tools that we've all mentioned, making sure that you've got VPNs, that you've got anti-malware, antivirus, making sure that you've got those policies in place, that you do a training. And really, it is that 80-20 principle. You can get a lot of the value by just some of those low-hanging fruit investments. Again, we're not talking about boiling the ocean, because there's always more that you can do with security. And as I mentioned before, it is a risk management game. And you can always invest more to make yourself more secure, but it comes at a price. And so for us, especially because most of the clients we work with fall into that SMB size, we're not focused on those really expensive investments. We're focused on those low-hanging fruit that most of our clients just need guidance working toward. And our thought is that ultimately, if we can keep it, $500 a month, for example, for most of our clients, that's pretty digestible when they see everything that they're getting in return, and you think about the value you're getting in terms of security.
Awesome. Michael, anything to add around that idea of security not necessarily as a high cost item?
Yeah, I think it comes down to risk mitigation, right? We need to put some value on what does that look like and have an honest conversation about it. Most of the companies that get for example, a ransomware or something like that, you're talking about 6 figures in a resolution. So we have to it doesn't mean you have to spend 6 figures on security, but what it does mean is that we have to give it some proper attention and understand what that mitigation of risk is. Like DJ said, if we're talking about a few $100, even if it's $1,000 a month, and what we're offsetting is potentially $250,000 in issues, and we're training our staff long-term on how to be better stewards of the data and of our systems, that seems well worth it to me, and most of our clients get that.
An ounce of prevention, as they say.
Yeah.
Chris, any other thoughts on security as well?
Yeah, I would just echo probably what Michael just said, which is that, I just think of the scenarios where, unfortunately, we've had clients come to us after they've had some kind of an attack, and just because they haven't had the security in place, and it's just so hard, and you just feel so bad, because the cost of being down, the cost of people not being able to work for something that, having proper antivirus or anti-ransomware solutions in place could have helped mitigate, pays off.
Yeah. So, as we close out here, I had just a couple more questions. Again, just to the audience, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask of this panel, please let us know in the chat. To wrap things up, let me start with all of you, and I'll start with DJ at the top. We've had a lot of great insights. I think there's been a lot of great little nuggets to take away from this. What's the number one thing you would recommend to business leaders looking to cut costs and increase efficiency? And I'll start with you, DJ.
So a big driver of inefficiency is underperformance. right? Because if people aren't performing at the level that's expected or desired as a company, then you're not getting the value that you ultimately thought you would get when you made the investment to hire that person or train that person. So then you not only are not getting that ROI, but then you have to also then invest additional resources to get that performance level up to what you need as a business. And so as a fellow business leader, actually one of the best things that you can do to increase efficiency and to cut costs is less of a quantitative thing, less of a technology thing, and much more of a people thing, which is making sure that with everyone on your team, they have a clear vision of what success looks like for their role. So we're about to wrap up May. We're going to start a new month in June. If every single one of your employees can adequately answer what a successful June looks like for them, that's a huge win. But the problem is that when you ask most employees, hey, come June 30th, if you were to look back on the month of June and say, this month was successful, what would that look like? They would offer a lot of vague comments. Oh, we worked hard, we got our numbers up. And unfortunately, most of the time when we see a lack of performance, it's not due to a lack of effort. It's not due to a lack of desire. It's due to a lack of clear expectations. And so now is the time as business leaders to make sure that we are not assuming, that we're not taking things for granted. It doesn't mean that we need to micromanage. It doesn't mean that we need to be the ones who are hand-holding the execution every step of the way. But it does mean that we need to make sure we're having regular conversations about what the end goal is, and make sure that the person responsible for pursuing that feels that they are empowered, that they have the resources to go and get it. And as a business leader, if they do not have those resources, it's our job to give them those resources, to provide the training they need, to remove those stumbling blocks. At the end of the day, we cannot force any one person to be successful, but the things that we can do are setting the path clearly before them, making sure that that end in sight is the same one that we have, and ultimately providing that constant coaching and feedback along that journey.
Awesome. Great insight. Thank you, DJ. Michael, same question to you. What's your number one thing you would recommend to a business leader looking to cut costs and increase efficiency?
Yeah, I think it's working with your provider and understanding what your entire technology footprint looks like. Again, everything you're spending technology dollars on, whether it's a hardware refresh, whether it's your data line costs, if you've not looked at those are constantly going down. Any of those costs, make sure that you have someone who's going to work with you on that, be a trusted advisor to help you get the best possible deals and opportunities out there. And right now is a great time to negotiate, because in most cases, they're expecting to have their clients come back to them and say, hey, how can you help me be better? Can I get more data bandwidth for the same cost, or for reduced cost, or even working into different copier opportunities to try to get managed copy down? Any of those sorts of things where we can be better for the clients is important.
Great, thank you. And then over to you, Chris, as well.
Yeah, so I would echo both points that DJ and Michael had mentioned, but I think something that DJ said earlier about planning. I think planning is the big part of it. I would also go back to consolidate where you can. Look at what you're currently using, and ask yourself, does it make sense? Can we shift everything from over here to over here? Long term, I think we're going to see coming out of this some technologies that have been around but haven't really been taken off or taken advantage of. Things like desktop as a service. Amazon workspaces, Windows Virtual Desktop, Microsoft. Those are all things that we're going to see, I think, a shift in the workplace towards in the next few years.
Thank you. That is the majority of the questions I have for this panel. I don't know if anybody from the audience has questions that they want to submit right now that we can take. We're about out of our time, though. I wanted to thank everybody who came and watched this. I also wanted to thank our panelists, DJ, Chris, and Michael. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. Again, we will have this recording available on our website, and we will also email it out to all the attendees and the registrants. And stay tuned, of course, for future webinars on many of the topics we covered today, such as cloud and security. We'll There's a lot that can be covered in those that can't be covered in just one webinar. So we'll be providing more of those. Thanks again to everyone. That's it for today. And again, thank you, DJ, Chris, and Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you.